You know what's funny? How we all pretend we're not wearing strings, like little puppets in a show we never auditioned for, dancing to music we hate. But here's the real joke. We tie most of those strings ourselves. Isn't that just hilarious? See, they tell you family is forever. Love is unconditional. Loyalty is everything. But what they don't mention is how those pretty little words become chains, wrapping around your throat like a lover's embrace that's just a bit too tight. Just a bit too tight. Did you know that moths will fly straight into a flame? Scientists say it's because they navigate by moonlight, and the artificial light confuses them. But I have a different theory. I think they're addicted to the burn, just like you're addicted to their drama, their tears, their endless, endless needs. Oh, how they need. And you're their perfect little moth, aren't you? Flying closer and closer, letting their fire scorch your wings, because they told you that's what love looks like. I used to be like you know, always running toward the smoke signals of other people's problems. A good friend, a good child, a good little puppet. Until one day, I realized something that changed everything. Their drama? It was never my trauma to carry. But oh, how they make you think it is. They're artists, really. Picassos of pain, painting their suffering all over your clean canvas, until you can't remember what your original colors looked like. You want to know the secret? The one thing they don't want you to figure out? Every time you try to fix their chaos, you're really just becoming part of their performance. Their star performer in a tragedy that never ends. And they'll clap, oh, how they'll clap, as you burn yourself out trying to save them from their own perfectly crafted disasters. But here's where it gets interesting. The moment you stop dancing, they call you crazy. The moment you step away from their fire, you're the one who's gone mad. Isn't that funny? How refusing to burn becomes an act of insanity in their eyes. Maybe they're right. Maybe it is crazy to finally love yourself more than you love their chaos. Maybe it's insane to realize that their emotional hunger will never be satisfied by your sacrifice. The thing about manipulation is that it wears such a pretty mask. It calls itself love, calls itself family, calls itself duty. It wraps itself in gold-plated guilt and whispers, if you were a better person, you'd stay. If you really cared, you'd keep burning. And we believe it, don't we? We wear those whispers like a crown of thorns, proud of our bleeding because at least it proves we care. But what if, and here's the punchline, what if caring about yourself isn't the villain they made it out to be? What if the real madness isn't in walking away, but in staying? In letting them convince you that their inability to heal is somehow your failure. Now that's what I call a joke. You see, I've learned that chaos has a rhythm, a pulse, a seductive little dance it does. And those who excel at emotional manipulation, they're the choreographers of chaos, the conductors of crisis, always ready with a new emergency that only you can solve. They're batting their burning wings at you, crying out for help while setting everything ablaze and expecting you to be their eternal firefighter. The first step isn't even stepping away. No. The first step is realizing that you've been holding your breath underwater, thinking it was your job to drown so they could breathe. The first step is that tiny moment of clarity when you realize their drama doesn't have to be your trauma, that their fire doesn't have to be your responsibility, that their story doesn't have to be written on your skin. And here's the beautiful part. The part that makes me laugh until I cry. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. The patterns become so obvious, like a magic eye puzzle suddenly snapping into focus. You start to notice how they time their crises, how they weaponize their weakness, how they've trained you to feel responsible for their happiness. It's like watching a master illusionist after you've learned all their tricks. The magic disappears, but something far more fascinating takes its place. Reality. You know why they hate it when you start to wake up? Because awakening is contagious. When one puppet notices their strings, others start looking up too. And nothing terrifies a puppeteer more than their puppets developing scissors. They'll try everything then. They'll double down on the guilt, increase the emergencies, maybe even promise to change. But it's too late, isn't it? Because once you've felt what it's like to breathe without their smoke in your lungs, you can never go back to suffocating willingly. They say that freedom comes at a price, but they never tell you that sometimes the price is other people's comfort. Your liberation might feel like their betrayal. Your boundaries might look like abandonment through their funhouse mirror of manipulation. But here's another secret. Their feelings about your freedom are not your responsibility. Their reactions to your awakening are not your burden to bear. Their drama about your escape is not your trauma to carry. Let them call you selfish. Let them call you crazy. Let them paint you as the villain in their story. Because the truth, the hilarious, beautiful, terrible truth, is that their opinion of you is just another string they used to control you with. And now you're the one holding the scissors, deciding which stories you'll keep and which ones you'll finally let burn. You see, these scissors I'm holding, freedom's little tools, they make a beautiful sound when they cut through old lies. Snip, snip, snip. Each cut is a revelation. Each severed string a new breath of air in lungs that forgot they could expand. But they never warn you about what happens after the cutting begins. They never tell you about the vertigo of standing on your own 2 feet after a lifetime of being suspended by others' expectations. The funny thing about manipulation is that it creates its own gravity, a warped force that bends reality around someone else's needs until their orbit feels like the natural order of things. Breaking free isn't just about cutting strings. It's about learning to walk in a world where gravity suddenly works differently, where up is actually up and down is finally, mercifully, down. I remember the first time I truly said no. Not the practiced no that really means convince me, not the hesitant no that begs to be overcome, but the pure, crystalline no that rings like a bell through all the chambers of your being. They looked at me like I had suddenly started speaking in tongues. Maybe I had. Maybe the language of self-preservation sounds like gibberish to those who've made a home in your sacrifice. You want to know something delicious? The moment you stop being their emotional paramedic, they don't actually die. When you stop rushing to their daily disasters, the world doesn't end. It's remarkable, really, how people who swore they couldn't survive without you somehow keep breathing when you step away. It's almost as if, and this is the part that will really make you laugh, they were capable of managing their own chaos all along. But here's where the real transformation begins, where the butterfly emerges from the ashes of the moth that burned for others' warmth. You start to notice how much energy you have when you're not constantly putting out other people's fires. How much clearer your thoughts are when they're not clouded by someone else's smoke signals. How much lighter your heart feels when it's not weighed down by borrowed guilt. They say nature abhors a vacuum, but they never tell you how sweet that emptiness can taste. The space left behind when you stop carrying others' burdens, it's not really empty at all. It's full of possibility, full of all the dreams you put aside while you were busy being someone else's savior, full of the person you could have been all along if you hadn't been so busy being who everyone else needed you to be. Of course, they'll try to fill that space again. They'll throw their chaos at you like confetti, scatter their crises in your path like breadcrumbs leading back to their cage. But here's the beautiful part. Once you've tasted freedom, their chaos starts to look almost comical, like watching a child's temper tantrum from across a very large, very quiet room. You can see the performance for what it is, and suddenly, inexplicably, you find yourself wanting to laugh. And laugh you should. Laugh at the absurdity of how long you played their game. Laugh at the ridiculousness of their attempts to drag you back into their drama. Laugh at the realization that their power over you was always an illusion, a paper crown that dissolved in the rain of your awakening. Laughter, after all, is just truth set to music. But be warned, this newfound clarity comes with its own kind of madness. The madness of seeing strings everywhere, of recognizing manipulation in its 1,000 clever disguises. You'll start to notice how it hides in compliments, lurks in gifts, masquerades as concern. You'll see how it dances in the spaces between words, how it lives in the silences that beg to be filled with your compliance. Sometimes you'll find yourself standing in the middle of someone else's emotional hurricane, completely dry, wondering how you ever believed you were responsible for the weather. You'll watch them perform their familiar dance of crisis and blame, but the music won't move you anymore. Instead, you'll feel something else stirring in your chest, something that feels suspiciously like joy. The real revolution isn't in the leaving, though. It's in the staying with yourself, staying true to your boundaries, staying awake even when sleep seems easier. It's in learning to be the villain in someone else's story while becoming the hero of your own. It's in realizing that their narrative about your liberation says more about their chains than your freedom. Think of it like this. Every manipulator is really just a failed architect trying to build their house of cards on your shoulders. They'll tell you it's love that keeps you still, that keeps you steady, that keeps you suffering under the weight of their endless construction. But love isn't supposed to be a construction site where you're both the worker and the foundation. Love isn't supposed to be a game where the only way to win is to lose yourself. And as the weight of their expectations slides off your shoulders, as their house of cards collapses behind you, you'll feel something strange happening. A metamorphosis of the soul, a recalibration of your entire being. The very chaos they use to trap you becomes the fire that forges you into something newer, something stronger, something beautifully, terrifyingly free. The metamorphosis isn't complete yet, though. The most exquisite part of the transformation is still unfolding. The moment when you realize that breaking free isn't the end of the story. It's just the beginning of a much more interesting one. A story where chaos becomes your teacher instead of your tormentor. You see, they were right about one thing. There is madness in this awakening, but it's not the kind they warned you about. It's the divine madness of realizing that every manipulation that ever bound you was also preparing you for flight. Every guilt trip was a lesson in navigation. Every emotional storm was teaching you how to find stillness in chaos. Isn't it beautiful how the very weapons they use to cage you become the tools of your liberation? When you first start to break free, you think the hardest part will be the leaving. But that's just the overture to a much grander opera. The real performance begins when you start to understand that freedom isn't just about escaping their drama. It's about becoming immune to it. Like developing an antidote to a poison you've been drinking all your life, thinking it was medicine. The process transforms you. Oh, how it transforms you. Each layer of manipulation you peel away reveals another truth you weren't ready to see before. Like how their constant emergencies were really just poor planning, wearing a crisis mask. How their "I can't live without you" was really just "I refuse to learn how to live with myself." How their love was really just fear wearing a fancy costume, dancing attendance at a masquerade ball of their own making. But here's the part that will really make them squirm. You start to find humor in places where they insisted you should only find pain. You begin to laugh at the absurdity of their scripts, the predictability of their performances, the desperate choreography of their attempts to regain control. Your laughter becomes a kind of alchemy, turning their lead-heavy drama into the gold of your own enlightenment. The truly delicious irony is that the more they labeled you as crazy for breaking free, the more clearly you began to see. Like a prisoner whose eyes adjust to the dark, suddenly able to see every brick in their cell, every crack in the foundation, every possible path to daylight. Their accusations of madness become badges of honor, each one marking another step towards sanity in a world gone mad with manipulation. And that's when the final piece falls into place. The realization that their drama was never really about you at all. You were just a convenient stage for their eternal performance, a willing audience for their never-ending play. But now you can see the strings, the script, the tired old plot devices. Now you can appreciate the artistry of their manipulation without feeling compelled to join the cast. They never tell you how intoxicating this kind of clarity can be, how addictive it is to finally see the matrix of manipulation for what it is, an elaborate illusion maintained by mutual agreement, a dance of codependency that only works if everyone agrees to keep their eyes closed. But once you open yours, oh, the colors you'll see, the patterns you'll recognize, the freedom you'll taste. The most beautiful part, the part that makes me laugh until tears stream down my face, it's that moment when you realize you're not just surviving without their chaos, you're thriving in its absence. Like a garden finally freed from choking weeds, you begin to grow in directions they never imagined possible. You bloom in ways that would have been impossible in the shade of their constant crises. Their drama loses its power over you, not because you've become heartless, but because you've finally learned where your heart actually belongs, with yourself. Every manipulation attempt becomes a reminder of your strength. Every guilt trip turns into a celebration of your boundaries. Every accusation of selfishness becomes a confession of their own inability to respect your sovereignty. And here's the punchline, the cosmic joke that ties it all together. The very freedom they feared would destroy you becomes the force that finally makes you whole. The chaos they use to bind you becomes the fire that forges you. Their drama, which was meant to be your eternal trauma, transforms into the catalyst for your most profound liberation. So let them call you crazy. Let them whisper about your selfishness. Let them weave their narratives about your betrayal, because you've learned the ultimate truth. Their stories about your freedom have become just another drama you're no longer obligated to star in. Their opinion of your liberation is just another trauma you're no longer required to carry. After all, what's matter? Breaking free from the circus or continuing to perform in it? What's crazier? Walking away from their fire or continuing to burn in it? What's more insane? Finally loving yourself enough to leave or staying until there's nothing left of you to save? In the end, their drama was never your trauma to carry. It was just a borrowed burden you finally learned to set down. And as you walk away from their theater of chaos, you might find yourself humming a tune they never taught you, the sweet, wild melody of your own liberation. Now that's what I call a perfect punchline to their imperfect play. Remember this as you stand in the ashes of their expectations. You were never meant to be their emotional firefighter, their crisis manager, their chaos coordinator. You were meant to be free, and freedom tastes like laughter in the face of their drama. Freedom feels like peace in the midst of their storms. Freedom sounds like your own voice, finally speaking your own truth in your own way, on your own terms. And that, my dear fellow escapee from the theater of the absurd, is no joke at all.